Turn, if you would, to Joshua chapter 1. Joshua chapter 1. And I want to welcome all of you who are guests. Very glad you're here. Just want to mention a couple of items. One is next Sunday morning, our friends Mladen and Dragica will be here along with Mislav Ilic, all from Croatia. Mislav will be speaking during our assembly, and we can look forward to that. That's next Sunday. And then last night, Addie Stegmoller was baptized into Christ. Where are you? Where are you, Addie? There you are. Very good. What a special moment that was. And if you'll hold on to Joshua chapter 1 for just a moment. Excel, Alabama. 603 people. They've got a Dollar General. They've got an IGA supermarket. They have got a small bank. Not a whole lot there in Excel, Alabama. But their claim to fame, at least in Alabama, is that that's the birthplace of former Alabama great and Dallas Cowboy great Leroy Jordan. And they're proud of that in Excel, Alabama. 603 people. Never been to Excel. Like the word. I like the word excel. I like the word excel as we think about a brand new year. We are just beginning right now. What are we, 14 days into this year? And by the grace of God, we lean into this year. We don't sit and wait and see what will happen. We don't hope it'll be a good year. But we lean into it, and we believe that the wind of God is behind us. And we believe that God's kingdom is being fleshed out in our lives. And so we've got something to look forward to, regardless of our age or regardless of what's going on. Listen for a moment as I read a portion of Ephesians 1 from the Message. You can be sure that using people or religion or things just for what you can get out of them, the usual variations on idolatry, will get you nowhere. And certainly nowhere near the kingdom of Christ, the kingdom of God. And so don't let yourself be taken in by such smooth religious talk. God gets furious with people who are full of religious sales talk but want nothing to do with Him. Don't even hang around with people like that. You groped your way through that murk once, but no longer. You're out in the open now. The bright light of Christ makes your way plain. So no more stumbling around. Get on with it. The good, the right, the true, these are the actions appropriate for daylight hours. And I love this next line, Jim. Figure out what will please Christ and then do it. I know we do it by the grace of God. I know we do it by the empowering Holy Spirit. But I also know that there is a place where we finally make a decision. Will I lean into the will of God and just simply do what I need to do today? Last week, today as well, we're talking about intentional living. We spent a lot of time last week just talking about ourselves individually, and today would like to talk about what that means for those of us who might be married, or for those of us in a family, married or single, and finally for our entire church. On the back of your order of worship, this might be helpful to some of you. I think for married people, one of the places we can begin a brand new year is by declaring that we want to excel in our marriages. that we want to excel in marriage, that we are not content to just live in the same old and wonder and just accept that. I was in a conversation with a friend of mine not long ago, and we were talking about marriage versus living together. Marriage versus living together and not being married. And my friend made a couple of remarks that I found interesting, and I'm going to share those with you. One reason why we as Christians get married and why we desire to stay married is because of who God is. Number one, God being present with us. God being present with us. Joshua chapter 1, verse 5. This is the Lord making a promise to Joshua. And he says in verse 5, "No one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you." Do you hear those powerful words? I will never leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. Be strong and courageous. Be very careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. And do not turn from it to the right or the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it, that you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified and do not be discouraged. Now, watch this next line. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Do you hear those statements bracketing both ends of this reality here in the first chapter of Joshua? God is present. He will never leave you or forsake you. He will be with you. One reality that we experience in covenant marriage is that we can model our marriage and ourselves after the promise of God and be able to look at another human being in the eye and say, I'm not leaving, and I will be loyal. Second, marriage is precious because God in His love is Israel's protector. Israel's protector. Joshua chapter 24. Joshua 24. Verse 14. Now fear the Lord and serve Him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your forefathers worshipped beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your forefathers served beyond the river or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Then the people answered, Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods. It was the Lord our God Himself who brought us and our fathers out of Egypt from that land of slavery and performed those great signs before our eyes. He protected us on our entire journey among all the nations through whom we traveled. God in His love is Israel's protector. In marriage, we're not just simply together because We happen to be happy at this moment. But we're in the business of protecting our covenant. You drive away at work, if you're a guy, and know that your wife is not going to be in the arms of another man in 2 hours. You drive away to work, if you're a woman, and know that your husband's not going to be with another woman. We protect our covenant like God protected his people. And then finally, God creates a particular kind of people. A particular kind of people. God is in the business of creating a holy people, a particular kind of people. And in marriage, not only by the grace of God are we able to give birth to children, but we're giving birth to a certain kind of family. In other words, as having sons or daughters, you're not just thinking about are they going to make the team or are they going to make B's? You're interested in shaping somebody. Now, I just wanted to say that, but I want to challenge us to start the year wanting to excel in, if you're a married person, excel in marriage. Number 2, let's excel this year in practicing godly habits with our families. Godly habits. I'm going to make a couple of suggestions. One, I want to strongly suggest that this year, that if you're a single parent, if there's a mom and dad at home, or if you're a grandparent and the grandkids live with you, designate regular times where each child can be with you alone. Where you can spend a few moments periodically, just her and her daddy, or him and his daddy, or him and his mother. I was on the phone yesterday, and this young mother was telling me about what her husband was doing, and she said, yes, he took our little boy over to the cafe in town. That's where all the old-timers sit and drink coffee. I don't know when that begins, but anyway, they're all there and drinking coffee. And he wanted to take our little boy over there and just sit and eat breakfast for a few minutes, and then they were going to go look at tools. That little boy can't even speak yet. But you know what is incredible about doing that? That father is planting seed. When our kids were small, I used to alternate Saturdays, and I would spend a Saturday morning with one daughter, and then the next week a Saturday morning with the other daughter. And it was not every Saturday morning, but it was very regularly. And for some reason we called it their special day, but basically what it was, for a long time, it was a trip to McDonald's, or a trip, this is the part of the country we lived in, or a trip to Hardee's. And I can remember sitting in a booth and watching that little girl smear jelly on the table while I had wet napkins ready to clean it up before we left. And we would have discussions about, do you go get jelly by yourself? Or what will happen if they say no if you ask for extra jelly? And do they ever say no to little girls? I'm telling you, my girls look back and they still remember those moments. Now, yes, later on that changed. They chose Chili's instead of Hardee's and McDonald's and all that. But I want to tell you, it's not too late to do that. And it's not too late to start that. I want to encourage you this year with your family to make sure your children are in a Bible class regularly. Now, it could be that you're at home and that you've got everything all set up and you're teaching them the content of the Bible, and you're doing all of that, and you just don't see a reason for enrolling them in Bible class. And boy, do I respect you for what you're doing at home. If you're doing nothing, and they're here 1 week and gone 3, here 1 week, gone 2, it is awfully hard to get a grasp of the Bible like that. And I'm telling you, we've got a lot of children who grow up and enter the college classroom biblically illiterate, though they have been in church all their lives. But could no more piece the story together. I'm not scolding anybody. I'm just telling you, we had to deal with that as parents. And I'd encourage you to think about your own commitment. Well, finally, and some of you may want to just tune out at this point, but some of you I would hope would tune in. I want to encourage all of our families, whether you're a single parent, whether you're grandma and your grandkids live with you, or you've got mom and dad together, to make a commitment to have a meal together every day at a table with the technology turned off. Do you know there are families who never do that? And I'm telling you, it makes a difference. It makes a difference when, wherever my thing, here it is, it makes a difference when kids see their daddy turn this off, because those kids are more important than who's going to text in the next 5 minutes or who's liable to call. It's huge. It doesn't take forever to eat dinner, but I'm telling you, it's huge. And it's not enough to be sitting there texting while your child is talking. I'm listening, you're doing. No, listening is not about hearing information. It's about paying attention. And we do that with our eyes. You don't have to have big fancy meals. Have a bowl of soup together. Have a sandwich. Call in the pizza guy. But a time where the kids know that we're going to be together. I'm telling you, when they get older, it becomes a little more complicated and a little more difficult, but it is worth the effort. And I would encourage you, if you're not doing that, for us, it was the evening meal. For you, it may be another meal. And actually, have a conversation. Television's off. Phones are off. I was talking to a friend of mine in Nashville the night before last. And I knew his parents. His father passed away 4 or 5 years ago. I knew his parents. My friend grew up in southwest Missouri. His father was a minister of a large church there. And I asked him, my friend Mark, I said, tell me about what dinner was like for you. And he said, well, Dad and Mom, first of all, wanted us there. You couldn't say, I won't be there, I'm going to do something. They wanted us at dinner. And then he said, I had the feeling Dad and Mom thought through the questions they would ask us. He said, they never, it was not unpleasant at all. But they would ask us, has anything interesting happened today? What about with some of your friends? Anything going on that's worth celebrating or knowing about, or anything that just bothered you that happened today? And he said they would just have these questions. He said what would happen is we might grunt or say a few things, but then 2 hours later I'd be outside with Dad throwing the ball, and I'd say, you know what I was saying earlier about Mark or John or whoever it was? You know what he did after that teacher said that? And the conversation would continue. We noticed, Charlotte and I have noticed that when we would put our kids to bed when they were small, very often they would continue conversations or bring up things that they had been thinking about during the day. And I think if we had just been together for the first time at bedtime, I'm not sure we would have had some of those conversations. We don't see our kids a whole lot right now. But we really try to make the most of meal times together. Last Thanksgiving, all of our kids were together, and Charlotte and I and the kids prayed a prayer of blessing for one another around the table. And there have been times when we have been with our sons-in-laws and daughters, and we just ask everybody to mention a couple of good things about each person. You can be as creative as you want to be, but I'm telling you, it is significant. Well, you were patient. Finally, I want to encourage us to excel at loving people well this year. And for all of us as a church, to keep that before us, to excel at loving people well. To excel at loving people well where we teach school, where we work, where we're a student, where we spend much of our time. To create homes that have environments that are nurturing and loving and Jesus-centered. A young woman was telling me about visiting a church a couple of weeks ago. And she and her husband walked into this, kind of like this is an assembly, and they sat down. They'd never been to this church before. She said they sat down at the back and they were late, and as soon as they sat down, they could hear this sigh behind them. There went my view. Now, surely somebody that would say something so stupid was on, I don't know, medication or something. I don't know. I just cannot believe that well, they said, we decided we'd just keep looking for a church. We've been called to love people well. A friend of mine was telling me the other day about a conversation she overheard. Two women were talking about going to church the next day. And both of these women were struggling financially, struggling with some issues they had in life. And one woman said, I like to go to the come as you are churches. And she said, that way I don't have to worry about dressing to try to impress other people. She said, sometimes it feels like that when I'm not dressed like the others, that people are looking at me and judging me. She said, I like going by myself to church because I can concentrate and listen better. But sometimes when you're by yourself, people don't speak to you. And I thought, we can love people well. We can love people well, whether they're alone, or come with an entire clan. I want to mention to you this morning a couple of ways that we as a church can love people well. In February, the first 2 weeks of February, we will begin on a regular basis a new class that Mike and Ashley Stegmoller and Charlotte and I will be leading, and we call this class Starting Point. It meets every month, the first week and the second week of every month. And it's especially for people who are not members of this church, but have just showed up and they're just thinking about, maybe becoming a part of a church or maybe you're from the neighborhood, or maybe you came as somebody's guest and you'd just like to know where to start. And so what we do for 2 weeks is we talk about, we want to get to know you first of all, and then we talk a little bit about who we are, try to give some helpful information. If you're interested in that, if you've been visiting for a few weeks and you happen to be interested in that, if you'll see me, or you can see Mike Stegmoller, their daughter just raised her hand a moment ago regarding her baptism, we'd be glad to talk with you. But I'm excited about that. And what the leadership of this church wants to do is we're going to be asking folks, instead of just suddenly placing membership, for everybody to first go through the 2 weeks of that class so that you can know a little bit more about who we are and we can learn more about who you are. I'll talk more about that later. A number of people in this church are involved in a ministry called FriendSpeak, and that is basically where someone who maybe English is not their first language, or maybe they come from another country, are willing to meet together with a reader and work on reading the English Bible aloud. And we have a number of people led by Ken and Betty Willis who work with folks in our community. Last year, about 20 people participated in this from South Korea, Brazil, Italy, Colombia, Mexico, Taiwan, and India. That is a part of loving people well, to provide a safe, hospitable, friendly place, one-on-one, where a person can learn to read the English Bible aloud. And finally, a way of loving people well as a church is through what we do in our city, through acts of care and concern. Some of you know that Scott Talley regularly teaches a parenting class and Child Protective Services sends people to this class. The class lasts, I think, about 6 weeks. Right now there are 40 people in this class. See, he represents our church when he does this. It's a part of loving people well. I want to talk for a moment about our food pantry, which is over here. This is our food ministry, is led by Carrie Driscoll and Shirley Davidson, and there's a host of people who work with them. Did you know every week, at least right now, this church is giving out 100 boxes per week. Boxes like this, filled with food to families. That's a lot of food. And they give this out every week to people who need help. It's a part of loving people well. Those are some pictures of the food that's there. You're going to come to one, I think, in a moment. There it is, where you can see kind of at the back, I think, of maybe the second or third shelf. I can't see from here, where there's some peanut butter and some jelly. See, there are certain foods that go in this box. And we are low, especially on peanut butter and jelly. And pinto beans. And what we want to do is we're asking our church to do what we did last year. And on Super Bowl Sunday, February 5th, we're going to bring a lot of peanut butter and a lot of jelly and a lot of pinto beans. And you'll bring that in, and then our children will come get those at some point during our assembly and bring all of that up here as an offering to the Lord on behalf of our city. I want to encourage you, if what you can do right now is buy 1 jar of peanut butter and 1 jar of jelly, and that's just kind of where you are and that's what you can do right now, I encourage you to do that. if you're where you can buy cases of this, as some of you did last time, we can use cases. Just think about how much is going out if there's one of these in every box and there's 100 boxes going out this week. That's a lot of peanut butter and jelly. What I want to encourage you to do is to take your children. Don't just go to the store and pick it up. Take your children. Have them literally take it off the shelf. See what that's like when you go through and pay for it. And kids, if you want to use part of your allowance or whatever your parents let you do to help with that, you do that. And our teenagers, I encourage you to bring lots of this yourself, all of us. And it's a way of loving our city well. Well, during the Christmas week, or it's all a blur now, but that Christmas, New Year time, I read this book, a book called Today We Are Rich. Today We Are Rich. It's written by Tim Sanders. Tim Sanders worked with Mark Cuban at broadcast.com. Some of you remember Cuban was involved in this broadcast.com, which eventually became a part of Yahoo, and then the Mavericks, he became associated with the Mavericks sometime after that. Tim Sanders tells the story of growing up in his grandmother's house. His grandmother's name was Billy. And Sanders went to live there when he was 4 years old and literally grew up in his grandmother's home. He said, my grandmother and I, we were just barely getting by. He was telling about this year when his grandfather had died. I think it was 6 months prior to this story. And he said, one day Grandma and I were in the back by the peach trees in the orchard, and a middle-aged man, came kind of ambling along, and he had this look that he had really been through it. His name was Clarence. And Clarence told my grandmother, and his grandmother's name was Billy, Clarence told my grandmother that he had been swindled, that he had lost most of what he had, and he just was looking for work today. And he said, I'll do anything. I'll work in any way if I could just do some work. His grandmother looked at the peach trees and said, if you'll trim these peach trees and clean out the barn, and the barn needs a good cleaning, and if you have time, if you could paint the trim on the barn, I'll pay you $10. I'll pay you $10. And he said the man got to work. And he worked and worked and worked on those peach trees. Tim Sanders said, I was just a little guy, and I walked out there and I just kept peppering the man with questions. He said he would patiently answer my questions as he would cut the peach trees. He said, my grandmother brought a lunch out to feed the man. Beans and weenies, and potato salad, and cold iced tea. And he said the man began to talk to him and say, you need to be like your grandmother. She's a generous woman. And she thinks of others, and she's letting me work. And he said he ate, and then he got after the barn and cleaned out the barn, and then he painted what he was to paint on the barn. And then at the end of the day, his grandmother approached him, and she said, you know, I promised you $10 if you would do a good job. But you did a great job, and I want to give you 20. And he said the man was just overwhelmed. And she said he kind of raised up one foot, and he noticed that he had holes in his shoes, and his grandma noticed that too. She went inside, brought out a shoebox. It was Granddad's new shoes he had bought shortly before his death, and she asked the man to try those on. Sure enough, they fit. And she said, "I want you to have his shoes." Tim Sanders said the man was just about to leave, and Grandmother said, "Could we get on our knees before the Lord and pray?" And under the peach trees in the orchard, we prayed for this man. Well, he said, Clarence left. We went about our business. And a few nights later, Grandma and I went to Burger Chef. We did that regularly. Every month, split a chicken fried steak at the Burger Chef. And he said, I remember leaning over to my grandmother and saying, "Grandmother, how in the world could you give him $20? $20. And he said, "You know, I heard what you said. I heard what you said after the man left." And she said, "What did I say?" And she said, "You said, 'Today we are rich.'" Grandma, we gave away $20 and Granddad's shoes. How can you say that we're rich? This is what she said. She said, "I mean that we have all we need. We have enough to share with Clarence, the man. And because we're able to share, we're worth something. And by being able and willing to give, we are rich." He said the puzzled look on my face must have told her that I didn't get it, and so she kept talking. She said, "There's bank account rich and there's rich in spirit. Some folks are bank account rich. Other folks are rich in spirit. The second kind is achieved when you make a difference." And she said it's the forever kind of rich that nobody can take away from you. Today, she said, we are rich. How about that? We begin a brand new year. Do we have problems? Oh, yes. Do we have issues? Yes. Are there things that are in the back of your mind right now? Probably. Something you're not looking forward to that could happen this week? Yeah. But do you know that when we're able to make a difference in somebody else's life by the grace of God, today we are rich. We're rich. And so we begin this brand new year rich. Are you a single mother? You're rich. And you can make a difference in the lives of those children. If you're a single person and you've never married and you've got these friends and you live in an apartment, you're rich. And you can make a difference in somebody else's life. If you're a young couple and sometimes you lose count of your kids, or sometimes it seems like they multiply in the back seat, and it just seems like you got constant bills, and all that goes with that. You're rich. We begin this year believing that by the grace of God we can make a difference. We want to excel in our marriages and with our children and create godly habits, and we want to excel in loving people very, very well. Today we are rich. Well, I want to encourage you to join with the rest of us in starting a year off like that. And nobody's in your way. By the grace of God, He will enable you to be what He's called you to be. You may need to start off the year with just having somebody pray for you. Some of our elders will be at the back, be somebody at the front. We'll be glad to pray for you just as this song is being sung today. We'll pray about your year together. If you're ready to be baptized into Christ, I would encourage you, like Addie did last night, to be baptized for the forgiveness of sins, knowing that God's Spirit will dwell in you and enable you to be everything you need to be this year. Today, we are rich in Christ. Let's sing.
Like you, Jesus, more.